I'm going to attempt to give you a brief summary of The Lord of the Rings by J.R.R. Tolkien. It begins in Hobbiton, where Bilbo Baggins lives among hobbits, which are sort of small humans. And yeah, they live in this little place called Hobbiton in the Shire, which is sort of like a secluded area where they sort of live in peace. And they're visited by Gandalf, who is a wizard. And yeah, so they have this big birthday party for Bilbo. And as they're having this party, he gives a speech, and he puts on his magic ring and disappears. And everyone is surprised by this. So Gandalf goes and confronts Bilbo about this and realizes that he has this magical ring. And so Bilbo decides to leave the Shire and go to an elf city called Rivendell. And as he leaves, his, I think it's his nephew or his cousin, Frodo Baggins, comes back and wants to know where Bilbo is. And so Frodo speaks to Gandalf about it, and Gandalf says he has to go and find out what it's all about. So Gandalf does some traveling and realizes that the ring that Bilbo has was actually a magic ring that was made by a very dark and powerful wizard from long ago. So he goes back and tells Frodo that he has to take the ring away from the Shire, because if he doesn't, he'll probably be killed. So Frodo decides to go and take this ring to away from the Shire, and he takes his friend Samwise Gamgee along, and yeah, so they leave the Shire, and they are attacked by the ring wraiths, which are henchmen of the Dark Lord Sauron. And they don't catch him, but they're helped along the way by someone named Aragorn, who is, he's supposed to be the king of Gondor, but he doesn't want to be the king. It's a little complicated, so just suffice it to say, he should be the king, but he doesn't want to be the king right now. So then they meet up with Gandalf in Rivendell, which is an elf city, and they decide with Elrond, who is the sort of king of Rivendell, that they must go and destroy the ring and bring it to Mount Doom, which is in Mordor, which is where the Dark Lord Sauron lives. And yeah, so they set out. It's called the Fellowship of the Ring, which is Frodo, Sam, their two friends, Merry and Pippin, Gandalf, Aragorn, and then there's Boromir of Gondor, who is a human knight, and Gimli, who is a dwarf, and Legolas, who is an elf. And they go off on this adventure to Mordor, and they go through these mines of Moria, and they have to battle orcs and stuff. And then they eventually end up, oh yeah, and before they leave Moria, Gandalf has to fight a demon called a Balrog. And as he tries to stop the Balrog, he ends up falling into a gorge, or like he ends up falling into the mountain with the Balrog, so he can't join them anymore. And but he comes back later. And then eventually the group splits up. Frodo and Sam go towards Mordor, and Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli decide to chase after Merry and Pippin, who were kidnapped, and Boromir died trying to save them. And then they go to Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli go to they end up going to, where did they go? Ah, yeah, they go to Rohan. And Rohan has been taken over by Saruman, who was a really dark wizard. And he's also a dark wizard. He used to be good, but then he switched to the dark side, if you will, and he decided to help Sauron. So at this point in the story, Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli have saved Merry and Pippin, or at least they are safe in a forest under supervision, and they realize that Gandalf has returned as a white wizard who is more powerful than he was before, and he was more powerful than he was before. And then they save the king of Rohan, Theoden, and they find out his son died, and there's some sad parts. And then they realize that Saruman is making an army to attack Rohan. So they flee to Helm's Deep, which is like a fortress to try to save the people. And yeah, some of Rohan's knights had been banished, so Gandalf goes to try to bring them back before the army gets there. And so Aragorn and King Theoden have to protect the people until the reinforcements come. And so they fight through the whole night, and the orcs of Saruman get very close to capturing them, but then at the end of the 5th day, or at the beginning of the 5th day, the knights return with Gandalf, and they defeat the orc army, and they save Rohan. And then they realize that they need Saruman for information, because as they were destroying, as the orcs were attacking Helm's Deep, there were, it's kind of complicated, but there were trees in what's called Fanghorn Forest, and Merry and Pippin convinced the trees to attack Saruman's tower, and so they defeated the armies at the tower. And then Gandalf and Aragorn and everyone go back to the tower, and they get it's called a palantir. It's like a magic ball that you can see other places, and so they get this and they bring it back to Edoras. They bring it back to Edoras, which is the capital of Rohan, and they see that Sauron is planning to attack the capital of Gondor, which is Minas Tirith. So Gandalf and Pippin go to Minas Tirith to try to convince the steward to protect his city and warn him and call for help. But the steward is very, he's a weak king, or he's not even a king, he's a steward. And he's also Boromir's father. So he's very upset about his son's death, and he's he's in despair. He's basically given up. So Gandalf has to call for help. Actually, Pippin lights one of the torches. It's like a warning torch to try to spread across the lands if they need help. So Pippin lights the torch, and it makes its way to Edoras. And once the message gets there, King Theoden decides to muster an army and bring it to Minas Tirith to help fight. And and also Denethor is the steward of Gondor. His name is, I think, Denethor. And his son Boromir is dead, but he also has another son named Faramir, who Denethor doesn't like very much. He thinks he's not as good as Boromir was, and so Faramir is always trying to prove himself to his father. And he goes to try to stop the invading armies, but he almost dies doing so, and he's brought back. And as he's being brought back, or shortly after he's brought back, the orc army approaches Minas Tirith to sack the city and destroy it. But at this point, I need to go back to where Frodo and Sam left off, because they separated from the group earlier, and they have a completely different storyline. So let's go back to where they separated. Before the other group went to Rohan, Sam and Frodo start to go through some mountains to try to get to Mordor so they can destroy the ring. And they meet Gollum, who is like this really decrepit and strange creature who used to have the ring before Bilbo did. And so they meet this creature Gollum in the night, and he tries to take the ring from Frodo, but they defeat him and decide to use him as a guide to take them to Mordor. But the whole time, Gollum is plotting against them and deciding that he wants to have the ring for himself, because he sort of has a split personality. Part of him is good, but part of him is evil, which has been corrupted by the ring. So, yeah. So then Gollum leads them to the Black Gate, which is the main entrance of Mordor, but then they see that it's heavily fortified, it's well protected, so Gollum decides to take them on another route. And a dark route, which is through the tunnel of, it's a back way into Mordor, basically. And as they're doing this, they get captured by Faramir, but then Faramir lets them go, and then they end up coming to the dark stairs, and they climb up the dark stairs, and they go through this tunnel, and there's a giant spider in the tunnel, and Gollum tries to let them be eaten by the spider so he can take the ring afterwards, but it doesn't work. So, yeah, and then they leave the tunnel, and Frodo is captured by orcs and taken to a tower, Cirith Ungol, I think. He's taken to the tower of Cirith Ungol as a prisoner, and Sam has to save him from the orcs there, and he does this, and then they enter Mordor after they escape the tower. And now I'm going to go back to the other storyline, and so the orcs of Mordor are attacking the capital city, Minas Tirith, and yeah, they're really losing this battle. And at this point, Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli have gone another route to try to bring reinforcements in another way. They actually are able to awaken a dead army of ghost soldiers who had sworn allegiance to the King of Gondor. And he was able to do this because he had the sword that was used to destroy Sauron in the First War reforged, and he used his power as the King of Gondor to have these ghost warriors follow him into battle. And they follow him to Minas Tirith, and they destroy the armies. But also King Theoden and the riders of Rohan also make it to the battle, and King Theoden is killed in the battle. And his niece Éowyn is able to defeat the Witch King, which is like the leader of the ring wraiths, like the main general of Sauron. And yes, so they are defeated. And King Denethor dies in the midst of all this. He commits suicide. He jumps off the top tower, completely in flames, because he thought that his son was dying, but then he realized he was actually alive. So It's at this point in the story where the two storylines, the Frodo and Sam, and also the other storyline of Aragorn, meet on the same timetable. So the armies of Sauron are destroyed, the ones that were attacking Minas Tirith. And they decide, Aragorn and Gandalf, they know that there's still an orc army in Mordor that is waiting to attack. And they also know that Frodo and Sam need to get to Mount Doom to destroy the ring. So there's a huge army standing between Frodo and Sam and the mountain. So they come up with a plan, sort of a diversion, where they will bring the forces that they have already and go right to the Black Gate of Mordor and draw out the armies so that Frodo and Sam have clear passage across. And so they muster up their forces and they go to the front gate and they call out the armies, and Sauron falls for this plan. He sees Aragorn as the new king of Gondor, and he goes to attack them head on. And as the armies are leaving, Frodo and Sam march towards Mount Doom. And during this time, they have lost Gollum. Gollum has fallen into a ditch somewhere or something. And then and also Frodo is very weak by this point because he has to carry the ring. And it's just wearing hard on him. And so Sam has to help him up the mountain. And as they are at the gate of the mountain, they're attacked by Gollum. And Sam has to fight off Gollum while Frodo runs into the mountain to destroy the ring. But once he gets to the edge of the mountain and to throw, and like where he has to throw the ring into the lava, he decides he doesn't want to do it because the ring has such power over him that he's no longer himself. So he puts on the ring, and Sauron is alerted to the call of the ring, and all of his forces are returned to the mountain, or they head towards the mountain. And then Gollum actually enters the mountain and attacks Frodo. And as they're fighting, Frodo and Gollum fall off the edge of the side of the mountain where he needs to throw the ring. And Gollum falls in with the ring while Frodo hangs on to the side. And Sam pulls him up, and they escape the mountain, and the ring is destroyed. And after the ring is destroyed, the Sauron is defeated, and all the armies are destroyed, and Aragorn becomes king of Gondor, and Frodo, Sam, and Merry and Pippin go back to the Shire. And actually, in the book, Saruman is at the Shire, and he's burning everything, and they defeat Saruman. It's called the Scouring of the Shire, I think. So they defeat him, and then Frodo realizes that the journey has changed him so much that he can't go back to his normal way of life. So he leaves on a ship going to the Undying Lands with Gandalf and Bilbo, and he leaves his friends behind for the last journey. And then the story ends with Sam and his family, and they're living happily ever after. And that's it, I think.